At this precise second, a retail giant is finalizing plans to shutter over 250 storefronts throughout the Golden State. This isn't triggered by shifting buyer tastes or local rivalry, but because the underlying fiscal reality has fractured. While leadership in Sacramento attempts to spin the situation, residents across California are discovering barren aisles, trekking further for bread, and witnessing the steady erosion of the shopping networks they've utilized for generations. This crisis is unfolding live, and the details I'm sharing today should alert every citizen, regardless of your zip code. I am your host, Christina Laurent, where we dig into the narratives that corporate outlets often ignore. If you appreciate investigative content that tracks the Capitol, unmasks the architects of policy, and demands transparency from the elite, then please subscribe to this channel immediately. Toggle that like button, forward this broadcast to your entire circle. Now, a question for the audience. How many miles must you travel to buy fresh produce? Because for millions of Californians, that trek is getting significantly more difficult. Let's analyze. This isn't merely a tale of executive avarice or capitalism stumbling. This is a lesson in behavioral incentives, regulatory demands, and the gravity of economics. Over the last year and a half, the state has enacted a barrage of administrative rules, pay requirements, and legal mandates that have fundamentally broken the financial model of running massive retail hubs here. Walmart, the nation's premier private employer, ran the projections. The data dictated a total retreat. What you are seeing isn't a hasty whim. It is the inescapable consequence of laws that dismissed basic math, penalized owners, and presumed that firms could handle limitless overhead. They cannot, they won't. And currently, the citizens with the least cushion are the ones enduring the fallout. I will guide you through the timeline of this decline, the people behind the pens, the ripple effects, and why this catastrophe resonates far beyond the West Coast. Let us revisit April of the prior year. That was the moment California's fresh pay floor for large-scale retail took hold, spiking the minimum hourly rate to $22. On a press release, it looked charitable. In reality, it was a fiscal landmine. Big box outlets survive on razor-thin margins in the food sector, often fluctuating between 1% and 3%. When payroll, the heaviest burden for any grocery chain, surges by 35% instantly, something must break. Within days of this enactment, corporate offices in Arkansas started pulling performance metrics from the region. The data was horrific. Outlets that were barely solvent were now hemorrhaging liquidity. Locations in distant or disadvantaged districts where traffic is thinner and shrink is higher were recording deficits the price hikes alone couldn't fix. Translation: the exact neighborhoods the pay law aimed to assist were the primary targets for elimination. Then came the oversight costs. The state didn't merely hike pay, it weaponized the bureaucracy. The Labor Board, already notorious for its intensity, gained massive funding to perform unannounced audits, track pay disputes, and levy fines for minor roster errors under new scheduling laws. Every single location was now vulnerable to random raids, and any minor slip, whether accidental or not, could lead to penalties starting at $10,000 per instance. Think about that. A solitary clerical error could trigger 5-figure fines across hundreds of buildings. Legal experts did the math. The price of navigating California's labyrinthine and erratic labor statutes was estimated to add $43 million annually to state-specific overhead. That is on top of the wage hikes. That is on top of theft rates, which in this region had climbed 62% annually. And that is on top of soaring insurance costs for commercial space, which rose nearly 50% in high-risk zones. By midsummer, regional directors held a crisis summit. Internal memos from that gathering, eventually leaked to analysts, presented 3 paths. Path 1, eat the losses and accept a dying business model. Path 2, spike prices for everyone, driving shoppers to digital platforms. Path 3, terminate failing sites and focus on high-traffic hubs. The choice took time, but the trajectory was set. Within 6 days, real estate teams received their orders. Pinpoint every California branch, unable to maintain a 5% margin under the new regime. That list contained 264 spots. Now observe the chain reaction. Initial domino, the firm reveals a first wave of exits 52 hubs across major southern counties. The administration in Sacramento issued a memo calling it a private choice. That doesn't seem reflect a booming economy, but inside those walls, 11,000 workers are suddenly jobless. And because the state safety net is already bankrupt and backlogged since the global shutdown, those families are entering a system with 3-month delays. Second domino. The exits create food deserts in places like Barstow. The closed hub was the only source of fresh produce for 15 miles. Families without vehicles, mostly the elderly and the poor, now face a grim choice: pay for premium deliveries they can't afford, or survive on gas station snacks that cost double the price. Public health officials call this food insecurity, and it is skyrocketing in the very zones these laws were supposed to protect. Third domino. The small shops living off the retail giant's traffic start dying too. A local hardware shop, a small salon, a family eatery. These weren't corporations. They were local dreams built near the anchor store. When the anchor vanishes, the ecosystem rots. Landlords facing empty plazas start defaulting on loans. The tax wealth that cities used for paramedics and road repair begins to vanish. Consider that a strategy designed to help workers ends up destroying their careers, removing their food access, and bankrupting their local services. That isn't an accident. It is a predictable disaster. Yet, the governor didn't blink. In July, he held a rally in the Capitol surrounded by activists and doubled down. He labeled the exits an affront to families and threatened to sue over notice requirements. Subpoenas flew, and the retail legal teams were forced to waste millions fighting political theater. Here is the kicker. The probe discovered zero wrongdoing. The company followed every rule, but the theater cost another $8 million in fees and stalled the exit by weeks, forcing the company to pay for bleeding stores every single day. In simple terms, California's attempt to punish the retreat only made the retreat more vital. By autumn, the firm had seen enough. They announced a second wave. 112 more doors. This time, it wasn't just poor areas. It hit the suburbs, the central valleys, even the capital itself. The message was unmistakable. This isn't about hurting people. This is about basic survival. The human cost of the second wave. 21,000 employees. That is 21,000 households wondering how to cover the mortgage or explain to their children why the paycheck stopped. And the state's answer? Another task force, another promise to tax the rich. But zero admission that their own mandate sparked the flame. Let's look at a human face. Consider Maria, a mother of 3 who worked the night shift for 7 years. She wasn't wealthy, but she was stable. The job offered a steady rhythm and a discount that kept her kids fed. When her store died, Maria waited 9 weeks for a check. She exhausted her modest savings, maxed out her credit, and faced eviction. Maria now works 2 desperate jobs at a fuel station and a diner, making less than she did before, with no benefits and zero stability. Or look at Robert, who spent 12 years climbing the ladder to a management role. He was years away from a full retirement package. When his site closed, he was offered a transfer 70 miles away. The fuel costs and traffic would have eaten his entire life. He stayed. Robert is nearly 50, competing with teenagers for entry-level roles that pay less than he earned in the 90s. He isn't a failure. He is a casualty of bad policy. These are not numbers. These are neighbors. Meanwhile, back in the Capitol, leadership faced a new hurdle: tax gaps. The state budget is a house of cards built on sales tax. Large hubs are the primary payers. When you kill 250 hubs, you don't just lose their sales. You lose the revenue of shoppers who now drive across the border to Nevada, where things are cheaper. The finance department quietly slashed its revenue goals by nearly $1 billion. The state didn't hold a rally for that news. But it gets worse. The exit allowed the company to claim massive tax write-offs for discontinued operations. The state's corporate tax take from them plummeted from $230 million down to almost nothing. The state lost the sales tax, the corporate tax, and the jobs. And because California already had a $30 billion hole, these losses meant real cuts, reductions in transit, housing help, and the very programs those laid-off workers now needed. Reflect on that irony. The state passed a law to support workers, chased their bosses out, and then gutted the safety net those workers required. By November, the final strike arrived, 100 more closures. This time, there wasn't even a press release. Workers found out via tape notes on locked doors. The company stopped explaining. This was a total evacuation. The tally hit 264. Total careers ended, 38,000. Total towns without groceries, 147. The governor, feeling the heat from both sides, finally sat down with the company's reps. The meeting was hostile. The company showed the ledger. It is mathematically impossible to stay. They offered a deal if the state phased in the pay hikes over 5 years and capped legal liability. They would stop the bleeding. Sacramento said no. They called it blackmail and refused to betray their ideology. The talk ended. Within 2 weeks, the firm cancelled all future growth in the state and closed its massive shipping center, killing another 600 roles. Now, the legal drama. Cities are suing, claiming the firm can't leave because of old tax breaks. The company says those breaks were based on revenue targets the state's own laws made impossible to hit. This will take years in court. Even if the cities win a check, the buildings remain empty, the asphalt will rot, and the people still have no food. Here is what the media is hiding. This isn't just one company. Target is pulling out. Kroger is stopping new builds. Independent shops, owned by families for decades, are collapsing. They can't afford the lawyers or the pay hikes. In 14 months, 72 local grocers filed for bankruptcy. 72 dreams destroyed. And the people they served are now at the mercy of Silicon Valley delivery apps that ignore the poor. California didn't help the worker, they gave the entire market to Amazon. Let me be blunt. This is not a failure of the market. Markets react to logic. California broke the logic, and the market responded as expected. When you make work expensive, you get less of it. When you ignore arithmetic, the arithmetic wins anyway. And the bill always goes to the vulnerable, not the governor with his private chef, not the politicians in gated communities, but Maria, Robert, the senior who can't drive, the family paying $8 for milk. These are the victims. So, where does this lead? The company isn't returning, others are exiting, and leadership is proposing even higher hikes next year. The spiral continues. Some towns are trying food trucks or tiny co-ops. They are noble, but they are band-aids on a severed limb. You cannot replace the logistics of a global giant with a Saturday morning stall. Others are simply leaving. U-Haul traffic out of the state is at record highs. These aren't the rich. These are the middle class who realize the math doesn't work for them either. They are moving to Texas, Tennessee, and Arizona, places where the stores are open and the leaders haven't declared war on reality. And here is the final blow. As the people leave, the power leaves. The state is losing seats in DC, the dream is being exported, and the nightmare is being imported. Let's recap. A law is passed to help the poor. It makes business impossible. Shops close, thousands are fired. Food disappears, small shops die, taxes vanish, services are cut, more people flee, the cycle speeds up, and the leaders blame everyone but themselves. This isn't leadership, it is blindness. My final warning, what is happening there will spread. Other states are drafting the same laws right now. They see this as a blueprint, not a tragedy. If they succeed, your town is next. Your job is next. So, tell me in the comments, who truly wins when local retail is regulated into the grave? Who gains when you depend on a tech monopoly for bread? If this reality disturbs you, good. Subscribe to Windsor Thoughts so you don't miss our next deep dive. Like the video to help the algorithm, share it everywhere, and tell me how far is your grocery store, because that distance is growing faster than you realize. This story is being written in real time. The choice is between ideology and reality. I'm your host, and I will see you in the next one.